if I can listen to my body, there is something incredibly empowering about that.
You wouldn't want to be your own mechanic. You wouldn't want to be your own interior designer. You wouldn't want to be your own plumber. Yeah,
No,
that's why we pay people money.
It's actually changed in a wonderful way where people are absolutely able to discuss intimate topics on the internet with their friends, with their families, in ways that really, I think, elevates like our shared understanding of what might be going on.
Hello, everyone. Today, we are privileged to have the presence of Audrey Tsang. She's the CEO of the app Clue. This is an app used by over 10 million people every month in more than 190 countries, which I didn't even think was possible, to religiously track their periods. Clue is a trailblazer in menstrual health and femtech. In fact, the term was coined by Clue's founder, Audrey Tsang. But today, we have Audrey. Audrey Tsang is here to tell us more about this revolution and her predictions for the future of health tech. Welcome to the show, Audrey.
Hi, Tom. It's really great to be here. Thanks for having me.
We've got a lot to discuss, like the entire future of healthcare with the focus on women's health. But do you want to kick us off with your sort of big prediction for the future?
Sure. So my prediction is that we will soon be our own best doctors. And now I see a couple of things happening already that lead me to say this. One is that we'll have a proliferation of data, health data. Two, the availability of technology and AIs is there. And three, and I think this is the most important part, we're going to see a fundamental change, a shift in the engagement level of the patient. So when we talk about being a doctor, it's actually going to change the way the patient engages with their own health.
What's driving this? Is this the devices that we're owning as people? Is this a sort of cultural shift, towards sort of distrust of doctors? Is this like an AI thing? Like, what's driving this?
Well, I think actually what's driving a lot of it is need. We'll both have what is necessary for this all to happen, but fundamentally, like people are realizing, I actually need to advocate for myself in order to get better care. I need to, because, and we see this especially in women's health. Clue obviously is all about women's health, and so I'm really speaking from that experience. But we see a lot of people in our user community say that they may go to their healthcare provider with their symptoms, with their pain, and they'll feel dismissed. They'll be told, it's just a bad period, or you're just PMSing, when really there may be some underlying health concern. And so I would say, what's driving this is actually that need to need to shorten the time to diagnosis, to get better treatment, to really elevate the level of care and the ability to manage the conditions or issues that we might be experiencing.
Like from afar, as someone that knows very little about this, it seems that there hasn't been that much discussion about many topics like the menopause or perimenopause or fertility issues. Does that mean that there hasn't been that much data about these processes before? To some extent, is this sort of bringing in a whole new era where people are having conversations that are more informed because it's not a feeling, it's a spreadsheet?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's not just a feeling now, and I think, well, yes, to your point, either menopause or even periods, like people weren't talking about that even 10 years ago. So Clue launched as a period tracker over a decade ago, and when we launched, it was revolutionary to be a period tracker. It was revolutionary to even say period tracker because people were uncomfortable talking about that. It's since changed. I think it's actually changed in a wonderful way where people are absolutely able to discuss intimate topics on the internet with their friends, with their families, in ways that really, I think, elevates like our shared understanding of what might be going on. But this is a process and it's still evolving. And so we're seeing now like menopause, that wasn't being spoken about at all until very recently. Endometriosis, which is a condition that affects 1 in 10 women. It's marked by chronic and debilitating pain. It takes 7 years to diagnose. That wasn't being spoken about. And we're seeing now a lot of I think early conversations about some of these women's health conditions and experiences um, that that do have an outsized burden, and that before, because of either taboo or bias, weren't spoken about. And it's, I think, that same taboo or bias, like if you don't have data, you don't have the empathy really to dig in and recognize, is there a problem here? If you don't have the data, is there a problem? I don't know. How big is the problem? Is it debilitating? I don't know. How debilitating is it? And so now, as we see more data, and obviously the technology that surrounds that and enables us to collect that data, we're actually seeing shifts in that, and we're seeing actually people lean in and go and feel more and more empowered too, with the fact that, oh, if I track my data in Clue, I can not only see what patterns I might experience in my cycle. I can recognize when something might change, when something is out of the ordinary versus my baseline. And I can say, oh, this is worth concern. Maybe I should go talk to a healthcare provider about it. It's exactly this tracking of data, structuring it, visualizing it, pairing it with insights, pairing it with education that I think is going to kind of feed the momentum into actually shifting this patient provider relationship that we've been talking about.
So, in more sort of pragmatic terms, today the kind of app Clue, how does it work? Like, what data do you record? What happens automatically? And then, what are your kind of plans for the company? To go into the sort of broader femtech space.
Yeah, so Clue, fundamentally, it's a companion. It's an app to accompany you for all the changes and all the choices from your first period to your last. And there are a lot of changes and a lot of choices. That's basically the story of women's health. The foundation of Clue, as I mentioned, is period tracking. And while most people start using Clue for like the very simple use case of knowing when your next period might come, what we've seen, over the years is that people are actually finding it very helpful to observe and track beyond the bleeding. You can log your pain, your mood, your sex drive, your hair, skin, energy, a lot of different categories and experiences and symptoms that are related to the hormonal changes of the menstrual cycle. And, for me personally, like seeing my data laid out in Clue, I can identify patterns in my experiences, like the fact that I'm more sensitive to migraines around the middle of my cycle, around ovulation, or that I have more trouble sleeping right before my period. I can learn about my body and feel empowered to maybe make a lifestyle change, go to bed earlier, and relax, take a hot bath, whatever it might be, so that I'm actually more in sync with my cycle and I'm more aware of what might be going on.
And now you have over 10 million users, including apparently people in Antarctica, which is incredible. How is that changing the relationship between people and their doctors? Like you must have quite a lot of anecdotes and sort of data points.
Absolutely. So it's changing it in a couple of ways. Well, what we were hearing a lot from our user community before is that I just want to be taken seriously. This whole, I know something is wrong, something's not quite right. Like I experience pain here every cycle, and it's a level 10 pain. Like, but nobody is actually taking me seriously. People are literally being dismissed or gaslit and told like, oh, it's just a bad period, it's just PMS. We fundamentally just keep hearing that people want to be taken seriously when it comes to that healthcare experience. And what we've seen is that actually, just to share some interesting stats about how bad this actually is, because when I was originally thinking about what is my wildest prediction, it's actually inspired by something that I heard from someone in our user community. We do user interviews actually on a weekly basis because we're always trying to develop a deeper empathy for our users and their needs when it comes to their health and well-being. And in these interviews, and we have heard, and it's not just one person say this, but someone literally say, "You are your own best doctor." I mean, my prediction is like, you will soon be your own best doctor. No, they're already saying you are. And I was actually so struck by this when I first heard it, because I don't want to be my best doctor.
Yeah.
I want my doctor who's trained, certified, experienced. I want them to be my doctor. And
You wouldn't
so,
want to be your own mechanic. You wouldn't want to be your own interior designer. You wouldn't want to be your own plumber. Yeah,
no
that's why we
one
pay
wants,
people money. Yeah.
yeah, no one wants me to be any of those things. But something clearly wasn't working for these users who are saying, like, you are your best doctor. I mean, their pain wasn't being taken seriously. They were struggling to get good answers or good advice on how to manage certain symptoms if they had conditions or whatever. And she ultimately felt like she had to rely on herself to advocate for care, to advocate for a test, or to advocate for that diagnosis, because she was being dismissed.
And people have different experiences depending on the gender of their doctor. And I ask that not to sort of be salacious, but more because I wonder if it's a problem with the attitude of the industry and it's sort of dismissive all around, or whether it was to do with people's ability to kind of relate to the patient and their own experiences.
Um, I actually have read some stats around how, let's say, perimenopause and menopause, like most doctors going through medical school today, and let's in the UK, are actually not trained on
Yeah.
menopause care at all. The vast majority, and I'm like, that's shocking, because literally every single person with a cycle will go through menopause someday, and some of it actually needs to be supported by our healthcare systems and by our healthcare providers. So I don't know that it's necessarily a gender thing, but I do think we have to raise awareness in overall amongst healthcare providers on what the actual patient experience is like. And one of the ways to do that really is through data, through tracking it, making it, building a structured data set and a structured record of what your health looks like, so that you can take it to your doctor, and perhaps convince them, like, hey, no, something is really not right, or something has significantly changed, and we've got to do something about it.
It was interesting, kind of when I was doing sort of research for this podcast, the way that perimenopause is talked about. It was almost like it's a kind of a theory, or like the current sort of explanation. Like it didn't seem to have a sort of concrete base, which seemed quite sort of extraordinary to me. So I guess this idea of having far more data can only be helpful when it comes to having more sort of robust conversations. So if people are moving towards an environment where, even if they're not their own doctor, they are at least sort of becoming more informed and taking control of these conversations. What do you think sort of happens to the relationship between the patient and the doctor? And what kind of problems can you kind of foresee in that sort of environment?
Well, so actually, let's talk about endometriosis. I mentioned that it is a condition that affects 1 in 10 women, marked by pain. I'm bringing this up because it's such an interesting. It's a condition that has a much large. It's a female health condition. It's a women's health condition. It's marked by. It's caused by endometrial cells growing outside of the uterus when they shouldn't be outside the uterus. They should be inside. And the interesting thing and the sad thing about it is that diagnosis takes, on average today, 7 years, since first experiencing symptoms. And people actually have to go see 5 different healthcare providers before finding somebody who's going to believe them and give them the tests that will end up resulting in a diagnosis. So when we were looking at this at Clue, we were hearing this same story over and over again. So we actually conducted a survey. We surveyed over 1,200 of our users who reported a confirmed diagnosis of endometriosis in our My Health Records feature. And first of all, an overwhelming 74% of respondents reported that they feel or felt like their symptoms were dismissed by their healthcare providers in the first place. So that's 3 out of 4 people. I mean, that's what's leading up to this 7-year-long diagnosis process. It's almost like a battle for diagnosis. In addition to having to battle for your well-being and your health, having this condition. And we have, respondents writing these heartbreaking things. Like, I had years of doctors telling me that it was just bad period pains, and no education about how to deal with symptoms, or flare-ups. I mean, I think that was the status quo. And then we also asked people, well, what role has Clue played in you getting your diagnosis and in you managing your symptoms? And in this, 75% of respondents said that Clue helped manage their symptoms by tracking them. I think there's something magical that happens when you not only observe, but also track and record what's happening over time inside your body. There's not only can you take that to your doctor and use it to actually improve your care, but you can also, I think, almost like feel empowered that yes, I am doing something. I understand my body, and I can actually take I can follow actionable advice that might help me better manage these symptoms. Similarly, in that same survey, and this is again to the point of diagnosis, which for women's health is vastly inequitable compared to diagnosis for men, but 30% said that tracking and Clue was helpful in them getting their diagnosis. And this is, surveying a large user base who, may have gotten their diagnosis for endometriosis long before they even used Clue. So it's really reflective of, I think, a shift that's happening where more and more people are taking their data and going, here it is, doctor, please help me better understand or better navigate based on it.
How much of this data is recorded automatically versus data that you have to enter almost like a sort of journal every night? And as we see sort of more devices spread across the world, whether it's the Apple Watch or the Samsung Watch become a little bit more sophisticated, or Whoop bands or Oura rings, or devices that track your stools, are you kind of seeing in a situation where people are becoming overwhelmed by this data? Or are we just getting a much clearer sort of picture with much more resolution on the relationships between behaviors and our bodies?
I think I see both. I'm super excited about all the innovation happening in the wearable space. I think that we all want and could benefit from a better view, a clearer view into what's actually happening inside our bodies at every given time, at every given moment. I would also say that, in Clue, a lot of what you're tracking in Clue is actually self-reported. It does take a little bit of observation and reflection because there are certain things that perhaps a wearable will not be the best at measuring. Like, for example, your period, and yes, how heavy your period is, but also pain, your mood, your energy level, how social you're feeling. These are all things that at the end of the day are and can be tied to your hormonal cycle and your hormonal shifts throughout your menstrual cycle. But it honestly doesn't take a device yet to measure those things. It actually takes someone honestly looking at themselves and going, how do I feel today? What's going on in my body today? If I'm feeling pain, what level of pain is it? Is it a 1? Is it a 10? Is it severe? Is it not so severe? And how is this changing over time? So
that might be quite a helpful part of the process as well, to start being more in tune and rather than sort of relying on devices to tell you how you feel, to actually be listening to your body and thinking about it. Like in a way that sounds like a good thing.
Yes, I think that's exactly it. There's something incredibly empowering about that. When you feel like, oh, you can't do anything, or you feel like, healthcare is out of your control. If I can listen to my body, there is something incredibly empowering about that. Like that's the seed, that's the kernel for improving, I think, the healthcare experience.
And obviously this data is incredibly personal. And in many situations like the US, with various different rules around the country with abortion, it's also data that could almost be weaponized. How do you ensure that you have the trust of your users? And how do you kind of mitigate any kind of threats in that space?
It starts with consent, and then we handle it very carefully. And I think consent and care are two keys to maintaining that trust. Let's see, our team is about 70% women. Many of us track our data in Clue, at least I like to think so. I track my data in Clue. So we're intimately aware of how personal and private that data is. It's the reason that we build respect for data privacy into literally everything we do. So not only do we believe in putting time and care into upholding some strict data privacy and data protection standards, we're also based in the EU with GDPR, which is a great framework to understand, how high that bar should really be. But we've also built that respect for data privacy into our business model. Our business model is consumer subscriptions. We believe at Clue that our product is our product. Our job is to build great product that people love and find so useful that they'll pay for it. Our users, on the other hand, and certainly not their data, are not our product and never will be. And I think that that's a very important delineation to make to maintain the trust of the user. It's like your data is yours and it should work for you. It shouldn't really be working for anyone else.
With this sort of massive global reach, like 190 countries, which I had to check to make sure that wasn't a mistake because I didn't realize there were that many countries in the world. So there's 5 places you're not in at the moment. Are you seeing something to work on? Are you seeing sort of differences across the world with how people track their behavior, with people's attitude towards sort of trust, with the way that it informs the conversations that people might have with sort of private healthcare providers?
I absolutely think there are going to be differences in each of the different markets that we're in. I think some of the more interesting differences, because we localize, we're in 20 different languages, and localization really also carries with it a little bit of understanding the cultural context, not just the language context of a particular market or country. I think some of the interesting differences are in, what types of topics are people looking to search for, and you may see in different parts of the world that sometimes it's more about like, hey, I'm this old and I noticed this thing, what's going on with me, whereas in other parts of the world it might be actually like, I need a safe place to explore attitudes towards sex. So there are some cultural differences. What we found is that we always want to write our content and design our app in a way that is inclusive, non-judgmental, straightforward, easy to read and easy to understand. And if we start with that baseline and attune to the different topical areas that people may be interested in, that we're really able to meet people wherever they are, literally wherever they are in whatever country they might be from.
So, Audrey, to what extent do you think there is a gender health gap, and how can apps like Clue and the culture that they bring, how can that change that and close that gap?
Well, I know there is a gender health gap. We've got the data to show it. There's a belief that, yes, women live longer. So they're like, oh, but women, longer lifespans. But the truth of the matter is that women actually spend 25% more of their life in poor health than men do. And this is not even to speak about like specific instances where women have to wait longer to be treated for pain. They have to wait longer to get pain medication. There's a research study that was actually looking at chest pain and how women have to wait longer to get seen for a heart attack if they report chest pain, because for some reason, and actually it's because heart attack displays differently in women than in men.
Okay.
That a healthcare provider might be like, oh no, this isn't a heart attack because you're not grabbing your left arm. You're feeling, chest pain here. But sadly, this means that cardiovascular disease is the number one killer of women, largely because of misdiagnosis. And so I look at all this data and I'm like, well, the gender health gap clearly exists. And why does it exist? Because I think so much of the women's health experience today is invisible. Take like the pain or the chest pain, or how does a heart attack display for women? We simply didn't have the data because we were looking at, the male body or a maybe a small male body to approximate what it is like to live the women's health experience. And if we don't have the data, if none of it is measured, like I said, we don't know if it's bad, how bad, if it's debilitating, how debilitating. If we have to fix something, we don't know what to fix. And I think, apps like Clue in helping to build the structured data about health, we are beginning to make what has traditionally been invisible and largely ignored visible. If you can quantify these experiences, if you can quantify pain, then you can actually make the case that, well, something here is not right and needs to change. And this will, I believe, shift everything, not only, your health as an individual, like your data can help you live more in tune with your health, your biology. But on a collective level, I think it also, we're in a rather capitalist society. When you can measure the size of a problem, usually that means there's a market there, and so you direct interest, you direct investment, you ultimately direct innovation to that area. If it's not measured, you don't know how bad it is. Now it's starting to be measured, and so as we build data around the women's health experience, I think there will be more interest, there will be more investment, there will be more innovation in the space. And then, very, very even practically, with more data, data also is critical to doing research, to doing innovation, to training those AIs that I'm sure, no doubt, will exist. Right? If data is there, you can use it to research. You can use it to increase what we know about women's health, what we know about specific conditions, and you can also use it to develop new innovations or new solutions. Measure how they're doing, and make sure that you stay accountable to continuously improving them. So I believe at the heart of all this is when we can take the women's health experience and structure it and quantify it into data, we can actually materially shift that gender health gap in many of those ways.
How has the industry and large kind of responded to this idea of having patients that are more informed and with more data? To what extent have GPs or primary healthcare physicians sort of welcomed the idea of having more informed patients with more data behind them? Or to what extent do they almost see that as a threat, to their judgment or their knowledge?
Well, ideally, you're bringing your data to your healthcare provider so that they can interpret it.
Yes.
So really, I think, it should never be viewed as a threat. And certainly, I hope people aren't, Dr. Googling themselves and then going, but doctor, you must agree with Dr. Google. That would be, I think,
they're using AI instead. That's even more scary.
Right. And I have no doubt they will exist. I just hope that they will be built and delivered responsibly and with all of the quality checks that are necessary for the health and medical space.
So we're looking towards a future where people are kind of driving their own diagnosis. Well, we're looking towards a future where people are driving the process and having more informed conversations, and they're able to kind of push against an industry which is somewhat dismissive of many female issues, and having much more helpful and informed conversations, I guess.
Absolutely. I think that would be a great place and a great world to live in.
Well, Audrey, thank you so much for coming on the show and for expressing these ideas and giving us your views on the future. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Tom.